Welcome to a deeper examination of the modern compulsion toward unceasing effort. For decades, the dominant cultural narrative has elevated the grind, the relentless, often public, pursuit of output measured in sheer hours and compounded exhaustion. It is presented not merely as a strategy for success, but as a moral imperative. If you're not striving, you are failing. This narrative, however, is not a blueprint for achievement. It is a profound failure of imagination and a fundamental misreading of human biology. The problem with the grind is that it treats effort as a purely quantitative resource. It posits that 80 hours of work will always yield twice the results of 40, ignoring the exponential decay of efficacy and the psychological cost of diminishing returns. This model of perpetual motion, celebrated in hustle culture, is built on a foundation of intellectual and historical obsolescence. The industrial hangover in the knowledge economy. To understand the absurdity of the 80-hour knowledge work week, we must look to its origins. The grueling schedules of today are not tailored to the human brain. They are a direct sociological hangover from the Industrial Revolution. The concepts of the 60, 70, or even 80-hour week were birthed in the factory floor during an era defined by physical labor and the mechanistic time studies of Frederick Winslow Taylor. The assembly line demanded constant presence, and the output was directly tied to the duration of the machine's operation. This was the era of Taylorism, where the worker was viewed as a replaceable cog, and efficiency was about maximizing raw uptime. But we have shifted from an economy of physical output to an economy of knowledge and creativity. The value of a software engineer, a strategist, or a writer is not measured by the number of hours they remain seated, but by the quality, originality, and impact of a few concentrated hours of intellectual labor. Pushing an exhausted mind to grind through the late hours does not generate novel solutions. It generates errors, superficiality, and administrative busywork. The modern pursuit of the grind is the unfortunate spectacle of a knowledge worker applying an antiquated 19th century factory metric to a 20th century cognitive task. It is a misalignment that guarantees burnout, not breakthrough. The psychological consequence, the tyranny of the hedonic treadmill. When the grind becomes a way of life, it exposes a deeper psychological wound, the tying of personal self-worth to professional productivity. This is a fragile foundation because constant striving is neurologically unsustainable. The phenomenon we observe in perpetually driven individuals is often explained by the hedonic treadmill. This psychological principle states that humans rapidly return to a relatively stable level of happiness despite major positive or negative events. In the context of work, this means that the immediate, intoxicating rush of a completed project, a promotion, or a financial milestone is fleeting. The goalposts are simply moved further away. You achieved the 70-hour week, but now you need an 80-hour week to feel the same sense of validation. The reward is quickly metabolized into the new baseline expectation, trapping the individual in a cycle where they must constantly escalate the effort just to maintain the status quo of internal validation. This relentless striving, paradoxically, is driven less by ambition and more by anxiety. Many high achievers use the grind as a shield against the fear of failure, the fear of inadequacy, or the fear of self-reflection. When you're constantly moving, you don't have to face difficult truths about your life, your relationships, or the actual substance of your work. the activity becomes a form of sophisticated avoidance. When this anxiety-driven effort eventually collapses, the result is clinical burnout, as defined by the World Health Organization. This is not merely tiredness. It is a syndrome characterized by three dimensions: feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job, or feelings of cynicism or negativism related to one's job, and reduced professional efficacy. Crucially, burnout is an occupational phenomenon, a direct result of chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. The grind is not a path to success. It is a system for producing burnout. The biological reality, the cost of allostatic load. Beyond the psychological, the relentless demands of hustle culture impose a heavy and measurable biological cost. The human body is magnificent at handling acute stress, the brief, high-intensity moments of danger that activate the fight or flight response. The problem is that the grind substitutes chronic low-grade stress for acute bursts. When you push through exhaustion, you flood your system with stress hormones, primarily cortisol. Over time, this repeated exposure leads to what biologists call allostatic load. Allostasis refers to the body's ability to achieve stability through change, maintaining blood pressure, hormone levels, and temperature. Allostatic load is the wear and tear on the body caused by chronic overactivity or underactivity of these processes. A high allostatic load manifests not just as fatigue, but as physical decay. It suppresses the immune system, leading to chronic illness. It contributes to insulin resistance and metabolic dysfunction. It alters the structure of the brain, specifically shrinking areas related to memory and emotional regulation, such as the hippocampus. This means that sustained grinding literally reduces your capacity to learn, remember, and manage stress in the future. The premise of the grind is a biological falsehood. You cannot consistently run a marathon at a sprint pace. High performance is fundamentally a consequence of optimal recovery, not maximum depletion. The counter model: deep work and intentional inaction. The antidote to the grind is not laziness, it is intentionality. It involves rejecting the quantitative metric of time spent for the qualitative metric of cognitive output. Instead of maximizing hours, successful modern work focuses on deep work, a concept popularized by author Cal Newport. Deep work is the ability to focus without distraction on a cognitively demanding task. It is a skill that creates new value, improves expertise, and is difficult to replicate. Deep work demands maximum energy, but for limited, highly structured periods. For a person conditioned to the grind, sitting down for 2 hours of uninterrupted, focused creation can feel impossibly difficult. Yet, this is where true productivity lies. Equally critical is the scientific necessity of deliberate rest. The brain does not simply turn off during rest. It transitions into different processing modes. During periods of true disengagement, a walk in nature, a hobby, or simple contemplation, the default mode network, or DMN, becomes active, integrating information and facilitating creative thinking. Furthermore, our biological cycles demand it. The body operates on ultradian rhythms, cycles of energy lasting approximately 90 minutes. Following 90 minutes of focused cognitive effort, the brain requires 20 minutes of rest or a change in activity to refresh its prefrontal resources. The grind, which demands unbroken 8-hour stretches of work, directly defies these foundational biological cycles, ensuring that the final 6 hours of the day are fueled only by caffeine, willpower, and exhaustion. The path to sustained effort, purpose, and resonance. Ultimately, the failure of the grind is a failure of purpose. The goal of an 80-hour week is often an extrinsic metric, a bigger title, a larger salary, external validation. These are targets that lead to the hedonic treadmill. A healthier, more sustainable approach involves seeking resonance, the alignments of effort with a deeply held internal value or meaning. The Japanese concept of Ikigai, reason for being, provides a framework for this. It asks us to find the intersection of what we love, what we are good at, what the world needs, and what we can be paid for. When effort aligns with Ikigai, the nature of the work itself changes. It becomes less about grinding and more about entering a state of flow, where the task is challenging yet achievable, and the act of working becomes its own reward. This is the true secret to sustained, high-level effort, the pursuit of meaning. When you are driven by a profound internal resonance, you are capable of immense output, not because you are pushing yourself toward exhaustion, but because the work itself is restorative. Your energy is not depleted, it is generated by the activity. The revolution in work is not about creating new machines or processes. It is about rediscovering the human element. It is about understanding that the pursuit of excellence is not measured by the calendar, but by the quality of our attention, the integrity of our rest, and the depth of our connection to a meaningful purpose. We must discard the myth of perpetual motion and embrace the science of sustainable, intentional effort. Only then can we move beyond the failure of the grind and into an era of genuine, lasting achievement.